When I found the small, ominous package in the glove box of my wife's car, everything I thought I knew crumbled in an instant. I wasn't the kind of guy to jump to conclusions, but this time, something deep inside warned me. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. The package itself was small, discreet, something you'd miss if you weren't looking for it, but its presence in her car was a loaded statement. With my pulse pounding, I embarked on a path I never anticipated. A path that would reveal secrets, shatter trust, and unravel my entire world. The morning I found it in Emma's car, I wasn't even looking for anything suspicious. I'd woken up early, determined to tackle the endless to-do list that always seemed to pile up during the week. Emma, my wife of 8 years, had left her car keys on the counter, a rare occurrence, and I thought I'd surprise her by taking her car to get the oil changed. It was supposed to be a simple, helpful gesture, but there it was, a small, unopened package of protection, carelessly tossed in the glove compartment. My heart skipped a beat, my hand freezing halfway to the door handle. I'd known every corner of this car. Emma wasn't the type to use it as a storage locker. And we didn't use protection. I'd had a vasectomy after our second child. There was no mistaking what I'd just stumbled upon. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a strange oversight, an item from a bachelorette party she'd gone to a few weeks ago? That seemed possible enough. She was good friends with Lisa, who had just gotten engaged and loved wild party favors. But even as I told myself that, the truth gnawed at me. I tossed the package back into the glove compartment, slammed it shut, and climbed out of the car, clutching the keys tightly in my hand as if they could offer me clarity. I was overreacting, I told myself. I took a deep breath and decided to put the thought aside. Emma had always been loyal. I was probably jumping to conclusions over something small, insignificant. But as I headed back inside, my stomach twisted. The nagging feeling wouldn't go away. The day dragged on, each hour ticking by with painful slowness as I waited for her to come home. I distracted myself with chores, picking up the kids from school, and going through the motions of a regular day. But the memory of that small package wouldn't leave me. When Emma finally walked through the door that evening, my eyes followed her every move, searching for something, anything, that could confirm or deny my suspicions. "Hey, honey," she greeted me cheerfully, setting her purse down. She seemed genuinely happy to see me, but there was something about her I couldn't ignore. Was she nervous? I tried to see it but couldn't tell. Maybe I was the one who looked suspicious. I smiled, hugged her, and tried to relax. "Hey," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Busy day at work?" She shrugged. Same old, same old. Crazy clients, last-minute demands. You know how it is." She poured herself a glass of wine and took a long sip, then looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, of course," I replied. But even as I said it, I could feel the doubt building up inside me again. I watched her, waiting for some sort of sign. I wanted to ask her about it directly, but I held back. What if it was nothing? What if I was about to accuse my wife of something she hadn't done? The days that followed were hellish. I felt like an actor in my own life, pretending everything was fine while the suspicion festered in the back of my mind. I watched her every move, noticed each late-night text, every call she stepped out to take. Suddenly, her business trips, which I had always trusted, seemed questionable. She'd mentioned a work conference coming up in a few days. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but now I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I had to know. 2 nights before her trip, after she'd gone to bed, I crept back into the garage. I opened the glove compartment, letting the pale light of my phone illuminate the interior. The package was still there, exactly where I'd left it, taunting me with its presence. I noticed something else though. An envelope slipped just under the package, hidden from view at first glance. I pulled it out, my heart hammering, and held it up to the light. It was a receipt from a hotel just outside the city, dated from a few weeks ago, the same weekend she'd gone to that supposed bachelorette party. I felt sick. It took everything in me not to wake her up and demand an explanation right there, but I needed more. If I was going to confront her, I wanted the whole truth, not some half-baked excuse that would leave me doubting even more. The next morning, I kept my tone casual as I asked, "Hey, are you still planning to leave on Friday for the conference?" She didn't miss a beat. "Yep, early morning. It's just a weekend thing, but I'll be back Sunday night. You'll be okay with the kids, right?" "Of course," I replied, managing a small smile. "No problem at all." She smiled back and started chatting about plans with the kids, but I barely heard her. I was already making my own plans. I would follow her. If she was meeting someone else, I would catch her in the act. The idea felt insane, yet I couldn't think of any other way. I needed proof, something solid I could confront her with. When Friday came, she left as planned. I waited half an hour, just in case, and then packed a small bag, kissed the kids, and called my mother, asking if she could take them for the weekend. I made up some excuse about a work commitment, and she agreed without asking too many questions. With that settled, I grabbed my keys and headed for the car, determined to get to the bottom of this once and for all. I followed her route based on the directions she'd left on the fridge for the conference. I was about 2 hours behind but hoped that would be enough to catch up. My heart raced as I merged onto the highway, heading toward a destination I hoped I wouldn't find her at. The drive was long, every mile stretching out the suspense. The rational side of me kept trying to pull me back, reminding me that I could be horribly wrong about this, that there might be some innocent explanation. But the package in the glove compartment, the hotel receipt, and the business trip at a convenient conference just wouldn't let me turn around. When I reached the hotel, it was mid-afternoon. Emma's car was parked in the lot, standing out like a signal that this was exactly where I needed to be. I pulled my baseball cap lower on my head and stepped inside, trying not to attract any attention. Inside, I made my way to the front desk and asked, as casually as I could, for Emma's room number, mentioning that I had a special delivery for her. I must have looked the part because the clerk didn't ask questions, simply pointed me down a long hallway. With each step, my stomach twisted tighter, like I was marching to my own execution. When I reached her door, I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking hand, and knocked. I heard a muffled shuffle from the other side, then the door cracked open. Emma's face appeared, her eyes widening with surprise that quickly turned to alarm. "Adam?" she whispered, almost too quietly to hear. "Surprised to see me?" I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. She opened the door wider, slipping into the hallway and pulling it shut behind her, blocking my view of the room. What are you doing here?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought I'd surprise you, but you don't seem thrilled." I kept my tone light, but inside, I was barely holding it together. She bit her lip, glancing back at the closed door, her eyes darting nervously. I took that moment to study her. She was dressed more casually than I'd expected for a conference, her hair down, wearing jeans and a loose sweater, not the type of attire she'd normally wear to a business event. "Adam, you can't just show up like this," she said, her voice tense. "This is a work thing. I told you that." "And I just wanted to be part of it," I replied, smiling despite the nausea creeping up my throat. "Mind if I come in?" Her face went pale, and she pressed her back against the door, as if physically guarding something. My suspicion turned to certainty, and I felt a hot flash of anger course through me. "Emma, what's going on?" I asked, my voice harder now. She took a shaky breath, then said, "Adam, please, not here. I'll explain everything, but not here." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I thought she might break down right in front of me. "Then where?" I challenged. "When were you planning to tell me?" "Please," she repeated, looking around nervously. "Meet me in the bar downstairs in 20 minutes. I'll explain everything. I just need a few minutes." I didn't respond, just nodded curtly and turned to head back down the hall. My mind spun with a mix of anger and disbelief. She just asked me to leave so she could finish. What, exactly? I couldn't stop picturing a man in the room behind that door. Someone hidden in there, probably listening to every word. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to turn back, but I didn't. I'd get my answers soon enough. The bar was nearly empty. I took a seat in a dimly lit corner, ordered a drink, and tried to calm my nerves. A tense 10 minutes later, Emma slipped in and took the seat across from me, her face drawn and pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "Spare me the excuses, Emma," I said. "I found protection in your car. I found a hotel receipt from a few weeks ago. And now, here I am, standing outside your room, and you're panicking like you just got caught with your hand in the cookie jar. So, let's skip the story and get to the truth." She was silent, her eyes wide with guilt. For a moment, she looked so small, like a cornered animal, and a pang of pain hit me, alongside the anger. "Who is it?" I asked finally. "Who are you seeing?" Emma looked down, fiddling with her fingers, her voice barely audible. "Adam, it's not what you think." I scoffed. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think." She took a deep breath, then began, her voice shaking. It was just one time. I mean, I thought it would only be one time, but then, it happened again." She looked down, and her shoulders sagged. "I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at her, struggling to comprehend the reality of her words. The woman I had loved and trusted for years, the mother of my children, had betrayed me. "Who?" I managed to choke out. It's Lucas." Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if the name itself was something shameful. I felt like I'd been hit in the gut. Lucas was a friend of ours, a close friend, someone I had trusted, confided in, shared countless dinners and family gatherings with. He was one of my best friends. "You've got to be kidding me," I breathed. almost laughing from the sheer absurdity of it. "Lucas? You're cheating on me with Lucas?" Emma nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Adam. It just happened. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I was in control, but it spiraled, and I couldn't stop." I gripped the edge of the table, struggling to keep my composure. "You've been lying to me. To our kids. To everyone. For what? Some thrill? Some excitement that I couldn't give you." She opened her mouth to respond, but I shook my head, cutting her off. "No, you know what? I don't even want to hear it." I was done. Done with her excuses, her lies, her betrayal. I stood up, throwing a few bills on the table, and without another word, I turned and walked out, not bothering to look back. But as I reached the door, something stopped me. A nagging feeling that there was more, that I hadn't heard the whole story. I turned back to find her still sitting there, her face buried in her hands, trembling. Against my better judgment, I walked back over. "Why?" I demanded, my voice softer now but laced with pain. "Why him? Why now?" She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I don't know, Adam," she whispered. "I can't explain it. We started talking more, and it just happened. I felt alive again, like I was young, like we were sneaking around just like we used to, back in college. But I never wanted to hurt you. I still love you." "Love me?" I laughed bitterly. "This is what love looks like to you?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice broken. Maybe I don't know what love is anymore, but it wasn't supposed to be like this." I stared at her, torn between the fury boiling inside me and the heartbreaking reality that she was right here, broken, not even trying to defend her actions. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't know her. Not anymore. "Go back to your room, Emma," I said quietly. "Do whatever you need to do to feel alive. But I'm done." And with that, I walked out, leaving her there in that empty bar, her tears mingling with the secrets and lies she'd spun around us. I didn't look back this time. I just kept walking, desperate to leave that part of my life behind, to escape the pain, even if it was just for a few minutes. But as I got to my car, a new wave of determination swept over me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Emma thought she could get away with it, but I wasn't going to let her. I would get my revenge, and it would be just as brutal as the betrayal she'd inflicted on me. The drive home was a blur, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I replayed Emma's confession in my mind, her face twisted with guilt and pain, and the name Lucas echoing through my thoughts. I had trusted him like a brother. How many times had we shared a drink, talked about our families, our dreams? And all the while, he'd been sneaking behind my back with my wife. My mind raced as I tried to figure out my next steps. It wasn't just the betrayal that burned, but the helplessness. They'd taken something from me that I'd never get back, and I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. When I got home, I went straight to the study and locked the door. I grabbed my phone and opened up the security camera app. Just a few weeks ago, I'd installed cameras around the house after a rash of break-ins in the neighborhood. Little did I know they'd end up being useful in catching something far more personal. I rewound the footage, my heart pounding as I searched for any signs of Lucas at our house while I'd been away. And there it was, a clip from just a week ago. I saw him pull up, park a few houses down the street, and casually walk up to our door like he belonged there. Emma had let him in, glancing around nervously before shutting the door behind him. I watched as they moved through the house, laughing, oblivious to the camera watching their every move. Rage simmered inside me, and I clenched my fists, willing myself to keep watching. By the time the video ended, I'd seen enough. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment affair. They'd been meeting in my home, in the very life I had built with Emma. I sat back, my mind whirling. There was no going back now. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I called Lucas, keeping my voice calm. "Hey, man," I said, sounding as casual as I could manage. "I've got a project I could use some help with. Think you could swing by later?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation, clearly unsuspecting. "What time?" "Let's make it around 6, I said, glancing at the clock. That gave me plenty of time to set things up. When 6 o'clock rolled around, I waited by the front door. Right on time, Lucas strolled up the driveway, a wide grin on his face. Seeing him there, so confident, so utterly oblivious to what I knew, made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral as I opened the door. "Come on in," I said, stepping aside. He walked into the living room, looking around. "So, what's the project?" he asked, sounding genuinely curious. "Actually, it's a conversation we need to have," I said, shutting the door behind him. The subtle shift in my tone must have caught his attention, because he turned to face me, his brow furrowed. "What's up?" he asked, his voice cautious now. "I know, Lucas. I let the words hang in the air, watching as the color drained from his face. I know about you and Emma, the affair, the lies. I know everything. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Adam, I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Don't insult my intelligence, I snapped, stepping forward. I have the proof, Lucas. I know about the hotel. I've seen the security footage from my own home. His face twisted with panic. Adam, please, let me explain. Explain what? I interrupted, my voice cold. Explain how you thought you could sneak around behind my back? How you thought I wouldn't notice? He swallowed, his eyes darting toward the door as if he was considering making a run for it. But I blocked his path, folding my arms across my chest. We're not finished here, Lucas. Not until you tell me the truth. Why? He hesitated, glancing down at his shoes. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he mumbled. Emma and I don't know. We got close. It started as innocent texting, then meeting up for drinks. She told me things you didn't know about how she felt so alone in the marriage, like you didn't see her anymore. I let out a bitter laugh. So, your solution was to betray me? To destroy a family? He rubbed his hands over his face. Look, Adam, it wasn't meant to be this way. I swear it wasn't. We got swept up in it. We both knew it was wrong, but we couldn't seem to stop. Couldn't stop? I scoffed. You mean you didn't want to stop? He was silent, his guilt evident in every tense line of his body. For a moment, a sliver of satisfaction washed over me. This was exactly where I wanted him. Cornered, ashamed, finally having to face the consequences of his actions. You're going to tell your wife, Lucas, I said evenly. And then, you're going to tell everyone else. And if you don't, I'll make sure everyone finds out on my terms. He looked horrified, shaking his head. Please, Adam, don't do this. Think of the kids, our friendship. You thought of none of that, I replied coldly. You didn't care about me, our families, or the pain this would cause. You were willing to throw it all away. Well, now you're going to feel what it's like to lose everything. At that, he hung his head, defeated, and turned to leave without another word. The next few days were a whirlwind. Word spread quickly. I had spoken to Lucas' wife, Melissa, myself, refusing to let her hear it from him. She deserved the truth from someone who hadn't betrayed her. She was stunned, heartbroken, and we sat together in silence as she processed the revelation. We didn't have to speak. We were both victims of the same lie. Meanwhile, Emma was still pleading for forgiveness, leaving voicemails, sending texts, each message more desperate than the last. I deleted them all, focusing instead on the path ahead. I'd spoken to a lawyer, and divorce papers were already in motion. This was the end for us, but I was determined to make sure my kids' lives would be as stable as possible in the process. Finally, the day came when I faced her for the last time, at the courthouse, to finalize the paperwork. She sat across from me, looking small and broken, her eyes red and swollen. Part of me almost felt pity for her, but I reminded myself of the betrayal, the countless lies, the destruction of everything I'd built. When it was over, she followed me out into the hallway, her voice a whisper. Adam, I know you hate me, and I deserve it, but I do love you. I always did. I looked at her, letting the sadness wash over me. Maybe you did, once, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But love doesn't look like this, Emma. This isn't what a real marriage is. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the courthouse hallway, her betrayal echoing in the empty space. The weeks that followed were hard. Friends called, relatives checked in, some out of genuine concern, others out of a morbid curiosity. But eventually, life resumed its course. I focused on my children, on rebuilding my life, and on finding peace again. One day, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from Lucas. I debated tossing it without reading it but decided, for my own closure, to see what he had to say. His words were predictably regretful, full of apologies and self-pity, but they were irrelevant now. He was just a chapter I was closing, a mistake I would never repeat. And as I folded the letter and tossed it into the trash, I realized that despite the heartache, the betrayal, and the scars they had left on me, I was finally free. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a second chance. A chance to start over, to learn from the ashes of my broken trust, and to rebuild a future based on honesty and loyalty. From that day on, I walked forward, not looking back at the mistakes others had made, but focusing instead on the life I wanted to build. For myself, for my kids, and for the hope that one day, trust and love would feel possible again.